Welcome back, everybody. So, as promised, this is what it would look like if I would send you something to do in ReadWorks via an online classroom. Okay. Once again, I know we may not have access to these materials, but if we do, I'm going to start thinking about possibly doing this, at least putting in some passages for the time being, and then sending out an email kind of, this is what your class code is, what website I enter in that. But that is all to be determined. Trying to sort all this good stuff out. So apologies down the road if it's not up right away. However, this is what I want to kind of show you though, because this is actually pretty cool. All right. So I assigned this without having the audio attached. Now, I can have audio attached. There'll be a little icon that would be above. You can just click on it and it'll read the passage aloud. Same thing here. You click on the questions part, right? Different tabs, questions, and audio. Those will be able to be read aloud to you. Now, again, what I also like about this feature is look at the following. You have these buttons up here, right? This would actually make the text larger. This would actually put down the quote-unquote paragraphs next to it. Now, if I ever see you guys call this a paragraph, Mr. Wisniewski would be really upset, and I would just probably think about all of the things that I did wrong and all that fun stuff. But in this sense, they are marking them down, though, at least. So that actually comes in handy if they do ask, like, according to the, where did you find the passage, or in the one paragraph. Very rarely do they ever ask those kind of questions, but if you ever need it. This next one is actually interesting. This is a line reader, and if you see, you click on it and then you just move up and down. Look at that. So that way, if you are somebody that just needs to read line by line, look at that. Interesting stuff, isn't it? And then this part, this doohickey right here, boom. See, just like if it was our English test. Here's the passage, here's the questions. Once again, like I said, even if you do click this button, I want you to still, again, read all this first. Just kind of skim it through first. And then once again, I know we talked about the possibility of highlighting. There is a tool. See, as we start highlighting the parts here, we can choose like a highlighter color. Ooh, look at that. And then we can make a comment. So this sounds interesting to, oops, I spelled interesting wrong. And then look at that. Oh, look, we added a note to it. See, we can visually mark down notes. We can highlight. So once again, that is an option to you. But again, sometimes we may not have that feature right now. But again, something that we can work on. Okay. So fun stuff there. All right. So here we go. All right, so let's just kind of go through this part here, okay? So the next part was kind of looking at the questions. And again, in the last video, we said we already knew the answer to number one because look at that, it was right there at that side. So what is the sessantina? Again, 900-year-old, okay? A lot of the times here, you're going to get questions, okay? The next one, like what's the structure of the story? Okay, what's the story's structure? Like, how's the story broken out? Okay, is it divided into 6 sections? It's divided into 2 sections? It's in 4 or 3 sections? Okay, so you got to think about here, looking at your options and then kind of going back again, seeing how this story is broken up. See how they have these little stars and it's broken up? Well, that can help us out too. There's 1 of those stars. There's 2 of those stars. There's 3 of those stars. There's 4 of those stars. 5 stars, things like that. Okay, so then I could say, well, if I'm thinking of that way, this is whole 1 part. This next segment, that's 2 parts. This next segment is 3. This next segment is 4. That's 5. Oh, and then that's 6. So we could say it was broken down into 6 sections here, right? Does that make sense that we can just think about that? A little bit stranger to think about in a kind of a context way, but noticing how it used even those little past parts there. And even as I'm looking at the hard copy now of the story, the stars are kind of there. They're a little hidden, a little tiny, but they're still there. So you could say like, oh, it's broken with 6 pieces. Okay. The next question, it's asking us to read the following sentence from the story. Now, ReadWorks does love doing this. They love giving you a part of the passage and then trying to make meaning of it. Okay, so that way it kind of avoids us kind of going back there. So if we're looking at this part of the story again, it says, sometimes, Cecitina said, painters have to paint something painful in order to avoid painting something other than just another painting repeated. Okay, so what does she mean by that? What does this mean? That's the question we have to think about. What does she believe in? Because look at this, it all starts off with that she believes in it, but what about painters? So it believes that painters what? Would they rather paint something beautiful? Would they rather paint something painful? Would they rather make paintings because they enjoy them, to visit museums, or that they should be making more paintings? Okay? So you're saying they have to paint something painful first, though, right? That's the very first part that this statement's going with. So painting something painful. So again, we have to believe that painters would rather paint something painful than something there. Okay. Next up here. What is Grace's attitude towards patterns? Well, it says Grace likes following similar patterns walking around. She likes following familiar patterns when walking around the city. When she's writing, Grace likes the patterns that are there, familiar to her, or Grace likes patterns that are familiar more than they are new to her. So what is her attitude towards patterns? And once again, you could, again, go back in here. Again, if we do the paragraph by paragraph breakdown, we have to think about where we can find that in the passage, okay? So those are kind of the questions there that relate to that. Don't want to try to rush too much in there, but just a kind of FYI approach. And if we'll kind of go to the answer. And if we do that, she likes the patterns that are new to her more than the patterns that are familiar, okay? The theme of the story, now again, a theme, right? The theme is talking about this main idea, this main driving force. Thinking about themes in general, like, good triumphs over evil, love conquers all, things of that nature. What is the theme to the story that we are relating to here? Okay. And if the whole time we were reading this, yeah, we could see how painting is something, and then we have, things like that. But more significantly here, it's about patterns. We're talking about patterns. And even in the title itself, patterns is mentioned. Okay. Another thing that ReadWorks loves to do is take a segment of the passage, like a bolded word or a phrase, in this case, literally painful. What does it mean when something is literally painful? So obviously, if we think something painful, right, something that kind of hurts, right, if there's some sort of pain going on. But if I'm talking about literally, right, what does literal mean? I mean, in this other sense, a literal question is something I can find right here in the passage. Now, if something has a literal meaning to it, sometimes we may take a direction literally, right? A great example would be there's a picture and it's like a kid that got in trouble, and then his mother said that he couldn't step 1 foot outside the house. So there he was, basically most of his body was on the porch without his feet outside. So he literally took it as, see, not 1 foot is outside this house, but everything else of me is outside. So in a sense, we gotta think that. So like the most we could take in the context, basically. And if we look at that and how a painting can cause him to feel pain, would help. The last part is we're selecting the word that would best complete the sentence. So Grace likes the Sessantina very much. Blank, Pete doesn't see the point of it. So in these examples here, if you ever see these again, just kind of go through your options and which one would make more sense. So she doesn't like it very much. In contrast, Pete doesn't see a point of it, or therefore Pete doesn't see it. For instance, Pete doesn't see it, or most importantly. But you gotta think, what's it saying here? So she likes it, but Pete doesn't. So we gotta think to ourselves here more of in contrast, right? So she likes it, but he doesn't. And that's contrasting each other. Okay? All right. So once again, so a little bit of the thing of how we go through the tools, and then kind of how we went through and saw in the passages there, kind of went through the questions a bit. Now, the next part of our segment is how we're going to appropriately look at these guys here, okay? These short answers, okay? All right, and I will see you in the next video. All right, take care.